Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the WLBB Community Voice Program on News Talk 1330 FM 106.3. I hope everybody is having a wonderful start to your Wednesday so far. I am your host today, Sara Claudia Cain, here with our guest, Randy Simpkins, who is going to tell us all of the amazing things God has been doing in his life lately. So, Randy, thank you so much for being here with us today. And why don't you go ahead and take a minute just to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Okay. Well, thank you, Sara Claudia, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. I'm a local kid. I've been here my whole life, except for the few years in the late 80s, early 90s that I was in the Navy. Raised in the northern suburbs of Rootville. So that's sort of a joke. But been married for 32 years to my soulmate, Crystal. We have 3 grown sons, Zach, Tucker, and Joe. Zach is married to our daughter-in-law, Megan, and turns out God decided to give us the smartest, most beautiful grandchild. We just lucked out there, but she's 2 years old. That's Eliza May. And so I'm bivocational. I'm a pastor at Bowden First Methodist, and I've just started my 8th year there. And I'm also a utility contractor. We put in water and sewer lines for cities and counties. But yeah, that's pretty much who I am.
A little bit of everything there, and it's funny. I think there's a lot of the most smartest, beautiful grandchildren out there. So that's kind of funny how that works.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, years ago, you and your family, there was actually a film made about some events that happened in your life. And I want you to take a moment just to tell our listeners a little bit about those events and how they changed your life.
Well, the movie is actually about an event that happened March 31st of 2000. At that point in my life, my boys were 7, 5, and 2 years old. And I wasn't a very good father. I was a workaholic dad. I didn't think I was a bad father, but we had our business was growing. My dad and I were partners, and I was all about growing the company. And so I worked 6 days a week, and even on Sundays I was at church, but I was a minister of music on a lot of different committees, and to be honest, my relationship with Christ was pretty superficial. And that had sort of become like a job too. So I wasn't really conscious about it, but I sort of subconsciously had determined that the best way for me to provide for my family was through material things. And so I worked a lot, and it really strained my relationship with my wife and my boys way more than I realized. But that's who I was at the time, and my wife we hadn't been on a vacation since Joe had been born. And again, he was about 2.5. And so my wife was really trying to mend things, and Crystal talked me into going on a vacation. So we were going to go to Gulf Shores for a week. And we live on like I said, just north of Rootville on an 80-acre farm that I was raised on. And so we were packing up. Our 2 oldest boys were at school. We were going to pick them up on the way, and Crystal was turning off the lights, and she asked me if I would put Joe in the minivan. And I needed to check a few last-minute emails for work and that kind of thing. And so he was riding his tricycle in the driveway, and I thought, well, he's fine. And so I went in the house just for 3 or 4 minutes, and I came back out, and there was this tricycle in the driveway, turned over, and he was gone. Anybody who has a child who's lost that child for just a few seconds, your heart automatically jumps into your throat, and that's sort of where I was. But after a few seconds, I thought, well, he's probably gone back into the house, or he walked over to my parents' house through the woods or something. So I started looking for him, and I couldn't find him. So after a few minutes, I made the courageous move of telling Crystal that I had lost our son. And we both looked throughout the house, and after about a half an hour, we called the sheriff's department. We called 911. Tony Reeves was the sheriff then, and they came out immediately and started helping us look. And I'd reached out to my mom, or Crystal had, and she called our pastor. He called church members and other pastors, and people came out and started looking. It was kind of amazing to look back now at the community that just everybody dropped everything they were doing, and they came out to help look for our son. Well, it went on, and there were several hundred people out there, and helicopters from the State Patrol and Atlanta media were out there, and it had become quite the spectacle. And about 4 hours into it, I found myself out in the woods by myself, and I sort of lost faith. And at that time, I fell on my knees and sort of buried my head in the pine straw, and I kind of, I asked God to not take my son. And just give me another chance to be a better husband and a better father. I was really hoping that, after that plea, that I would just open my eyes and I'd see him. But I just pictured, the things in his life that I would miss out on. And then I just pictured a tombstone with his name on it. Well, sometime during that time, there was a man that lived down the road. His name was Ed Walker. Ed, and he was 70 years old, and Ed had heart surgery just 2 months earlier. And Ed and Terry, his son, had heard about the Simpkins boy up the road that had disappeared, and they came and joined the search as well. And Ed went to the back edge of the property because there were, at this time, probably 400 people or so out looking, but nobody went to the back edge of the property. There was a barbed wire fence there, an electric fence, and behind that was an old rusted barbed wire fence, and then behind that was an old rusted hog wire fence and 20-foot tall privet hedge going back into the deep woods and the swamps. Those are full of coyotes and bobcats back there, so nobody went back there thinking there's no way a 2-year-old could go back there. But Ed told Terry, help me get through here, and let's just go 10 feet, and let's see what we can hear. You go left, I'll go right. Let's just go 10 feet. And he helped him, and after that he said, let's go another 10 feet, and then another 10 feet. And they went about 600 yards through those deep woods. This was about 7 or 8 hours into it. And Ed was just about to turn around and come back, and he heard a dog bark. Well, there was one of my employees had a dog that he couldn't take care of anymore, and he asked me to take her to the pound. He was tender-hearted, and I already had a dog. I didn't want another dog, but I was kind of tender-hearted too, and I hadn't gotten around to taking the dog to the pound yet. And so he had heard the dog bark, and he walked towards the dog, and he saw a big tree that had blown over, and the dog was sitting there. And then he saw my son walk from under that root ball of that tree. Wow. And he thought, what could I say? So, because he was wanting to, run away. And he said the two words that came to mind were mama and tractor. And he said, Joe, do you want to go ride my tractor? And he said, Joe sort of stopped and cocked his head sideways. And he said, come on, I'll take you to mama. And Joe ran up and just held on to him.
Oh, my goodness.
And I apologize for getting emotional, but it still hits me, because it changed me so much that day. But I was back at the house. The sheriff had asked me to stay around the house. And I heard over the radio, we found the boy, and he's alive. And we found the dog, too. And so that totally changed me that day. I immediately had a light bulb moment. And I told God, and I actually grabbed one of the firemen's loudspeakers, and I shared it because it was a big party then. Hundreds of people were celebrating with us, and I said, God gave me another chance, and I'm gonna hold to what I promised Him that day, and I've tried to live by that. But and I've shared that testimony with a number of people. But about 8 years later, actually, as a result of that, I felt a need to give back to my community, and I ran for county commissioner. I had been asked previously to, and I was elected, and I served for 8 years. And during that time, towards the end of it, around 2007, some filmmakers were coming to Carrollton to shoot a movie in Whitesburg called Conjurer with John Schneider. And so they were looking for locations, and they called the county office and asked for help. And so it was my area that they were looking at. So the county called me, and I went out and spent the day with them. And they said, you don't seem like a politician. And I said, thank you. I appreciate that. And they said, how'd you get involved with politics? And so I shared with them my testimony of what happened that day. About a year later, those guys came up to me, and they said, that story really impacted us. We're both fathers, and we can relate to needing to hear that message of priorities, and we'd like to do your story. And we were opposed to it to start with, but then we got to thinking that, we all have testimonies, and God gives us those testimonies, and they're His. They're not ours to keep to ourselves. And hopefully others could learn from our mistakes, from my mistakes. And so we prayed about it, and we told Him, if you won't change what happened, then we'll agree to it. And they did. They filmed it in 2008, and Lionsgate released it in 2010. It's called The Way Home.
Wow. That's amazing. It's amazing how God uses those situations to change your perspective. And I thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors, Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy. But then we'll be back because we're not done. God is still using events in your life to change lives. So stay tuned.
The customized academic scholar journey at Oak Mountain Academy is individually designed to provide students with a personalized, clearly defined academic track that earns the student a series of distinctions upon graduation. This journey enables academically driven students to pursue a focused, rigorous course of study personalized to their wants and desires. I'm Patrick Uran, head of school, inviting you to journey with us on the mountain. For more information, visit us at oakmountain.us. Discover your journey at OMA. Prepare, explore, and achieve.
Health is a journey. It's making better choices, even when it's not easy. It's taking care of yourself and the people you love. At Tanner Health System, we're there for you with every step, with primary care, heart care, cancer care, women's care, orthopedics, surgical services, and so much more. We're dedicated to helping you live and feel your best. So let's get on that journey to health. You've got places to be for many years to come. Find us at tanner.org.
Welcome back to the WLBB Community Voice program here on News Talk 1330 FM 106.3. I'm here with Randy Simpkins, who was just telling us an amazing story that God used to kind of change his perspective and his trajectory in life. And so now today, you're actually preparing to film, maybe you could call it a sequel to that. It's about events that have happened in the lives of you and your family and some others that have really changed not only you, but those special individuals' lives as well. And it all centers around kidney donation.
That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Well, to lead up to it, in 2016, I went on a 3-day retreat that I went reluctantly, but my wife wanted me to go. It seems to be a theme in my life. It was called Walk to Emmaus, and it's a 3-day event. No phones, no watch. It's just you and in that case a group of men, and it was on that 3-day journey where God really affirmed for me that He wanted me to go into the ministry. And so it was a few months after that when I became pastor at Bowden First Methodist. And years later, actually last year, 2022, I had the opportunity. One of my bucket list items has always been to hike the Appalachian Trail. It's about 2,200 miles. And in 2022, I was appointed as one of 2 Appalachian Trail chaplains to serve. I was appointed by the Holston Conference out of Tennessee of the United Methodist Church, which I was a part of at that time. And so I started January 1st hiking the Appalachian Trail. I started early because there was a big vote that was coming up in August, and I needed to be with the church when that happened. It was a worldwide vote in the UMC, and it was supposed to be. And so I started January 1st, and I was on trail for about 3 weeks. And I was in North Carolina about 100 miles in, and life and church circumstances changed. And I was forced to come off trail. Well, first there was a blizzard, and everyone got off a trail. And then I was home for a week because of the blizzard. Then I got jury duty, so I was home for another week. And then circumstances changed that kept me from being able to go back on trail. So I was really disappointed about that. But I had been asked to serve at another Walk to Emmaus, a women's retreat, as the head spiritual. That's what they call them, as one of the clergy. And but it was going to be right in the middle of this 6-month hike that I was on, and so I had declined. But since I was back home and wasn't going to be able to go back on trail, I agreed to go and serve as the head clergy. So that was March of 22. On the second day of that 3-day retreat, I went into the kitchen as I typically do. I'm an early riser, and my normal routine, I would go into the kitchen and around 5 o'clock and get a cup of coffee, and then go sit down in the conference room and do my devotion and plan out the day. And nobody else was ever up that early, and so I went in the kitchen. I got my coffee, and I overheard a lady talking through the pavilion on the other side. She didn't know I was in there, and she was talking to her mother and to her daughter. There were 3 of them in there, and she was very upset. I couldn't really tell what she was saying until she elevated her voice, and I heard her say, "We've got to pray we can find somebody that's O positive, that's willing to give up a body part. How do you ask somebody for a body part?" And God just laid it on my heart. This is why you're off trail. And being in the military, I knew I was O positive. So I stuck my head around the corner and I said, "Hey, I was eavesdropping. I'm O positive. I'll be glad to donate or be tested for it." And she said, "Who are you?" Because I'd done mostly men's retreats. And I said, "I'm Crystal's husband." She knew my wife. And so I went and told Crystal, and we prayed. We went to the chapel, and all of us prayed together. Well, it turns out her husband at that time had less than a year to live. He had had a heart failure that reduced the blood flow to both of his kidneys. And so he was at the highest stage of renal failure, and was just getting put on the kidney transplant list. In Georgia, the average wait time for a kidney transplant is 7 to 9 years. And there's over 100,000 people, right at 100,000 people in our country that are on the kidney transplant list that are waiting for a kidney. And the average life expectancy is less than the average wait time.
Wow.
And so I started this testing process, and it turns out that since I had a blood transfusion in the past, that he had a blood transfusion in the past, that sort of mixes up your bloods. I think it's called HLA. It's sort of like your blood's DNA. So they told us there's no way that you'll match. There's like 1 chance in 10,000, but you can do what's called a paired exchange, where you can give your kidney to someone that you match with, and then he gets elevated to the top of the transplant list. And so they will try to find a kidney to match him in a matter of days or weeks instead of years. So I agreed to do that. By August 8th, I went in for a full body workup. By the end of August, they called me and they said, "I can't explain this. Never seen this before, but we put your blood together and it coagulated. It's like you've been housing his kidney for 54 years. It is the perfect match." And so I got to call him, and at this point I'd not met him yet. And I met him a week before the surgery, but September 30th was the date of this past year that we did the kidney transplant, and they put it in 15 seconds. It pinked up and started producing, and we talk all the time. He's doing wonderfully. He was on dialysis 3 days a week. 4 hours per event, and so that is such a crisis in our country. 1 out of every 10 has chronic kidney disease, and it totally gave him life, and it totally transformed me to have a front row seat, to be the conduit through which God's working and give someone the gift of life. It's amazing, and so that brought us to that point.
Yeah, that is amazing. And that the doctor's saying they can't explain it. Well, we know we can explain it. And thank you so much for sharing that with us again. Another amazing story that is changing lives and is going to continue to change lives, which we'll hear more about after this short break to hear from our sponsors. Stay tuned.
The World Language Scholar Journey at Oak Mountain Academy is designed to provide students with a clearly defined, curriculum-based track to acquire essential knowledge and skills for success in biliteracy fields of study. The successful completion of this journey provides colleges with a method to recognize a rigorous foreign language immersion experience for all students at Oak Mountain Academy. I'm Patrick Uran, head of school, inviting you to journey with us on the mountain. For more information, visit us at oakmountain.us. Discover your journey at OMA. Prepare, explore, and achieve.
Health is a journey. It's making better choices, even when it's not easy. It's taking care of yourself and the people you love. At Tanner Health System, we're there for you with every step, with primary care, heart care, cancer care, women's care, orthopedics, surgical services, and so much more. We're dedicated to helping you live and feel your best. So let's get on that journey to health. You've got places to be for many years to come. Find us at tanner.org.
Welcome back to Community Voice. I'm Sara Claudia Cain here with our guest Randy Simpkins, who is just sharing some amazing events that have happened throughout his life. He just told us about his story with kidney donation, and Randy, it's just amazing to kind of look back and see how God has orchestrated perfectly all of these events. And I know your goal is to really share the importance of kidney donation and the need for it in this country. So how are you planning on doing that, and what's the message you want people to gain from this?
Well, it's amazing because without the first part of the story, where we are now never would have happened. Mm-hmm. So about a week after the surgery, I went back to Anchor Fitness, which is where I wouldn't have been able to donate the kidney if I hadn't gotten in better shape, and they gave me the motivation and the support to do that. I love that place. But within a week, I was back to the gym, and I wasn't supposed to be, but I felt great. I was surprised at how quickly I recovered. And after 3 weeks or so, I felt completely recovered, although I wasn't. I still had to be careful for a period of months not to pick up anything too heavy. But I was just amazed at how great at the ease of it, of the whole process. And so a pastor friend of mine asked me to come to his men's breakfast. And this was maybe 6 weeks after the surgery, so mid-October of last year. He asked me to come and share, and I did. And I shared what I just shared with you, our testimony of what happened and how God orchestrated. I wasn't even supposed to be at the women's retreat. And sure enough, I was the perfect match for Russell. That was everything about that story was God orchestrated. And so I shared my testimony with those men that morning, maybe 30 of them. And after I was done, 2 different men approached me and they said, "You seem to feel great. It's only been a few weeks." And I said, I do. And they said, "How would I go about doing that? I would like to do that too, to learn more about how I can donate a kidney." And which I thought was wonderful. And I shared with them what I could at the time and gave them what I knew. And about a week later, Bowden Kiwanis had asked me to come and share my testimony. And so I went there, and same thing happened. At the end of sharing my testimony, a lady came up and asked me questions about donating a kidney. And because of those, and there was one other instance in December, I was doing a devotion for the Pregnancy Resource Center for the staff. And I shared the testimony again to them. And in every case, there were questions about, how could I do that? People wanted to make a difference. And so I just got to thinking, there's 100,000 people in our country that are literally dying for a kidney. We're not aware of the great need that's out there and the ease. It's not the same as some of the other organs. Mm-hmm. My numbers are right back to where they were before. And one thing that I didn't know is if you are a live kidney donor, you automatically, if anything ever happens to me for the rest of my life and I need a kidney, I'm at the top of the transplant list. That's just a perk that I didn't know about. There's a lot of perks that I wasn't aware of. It didn't cost me anything to donate the kidney. I think $20 for some pain medication that I forgot to turn the receipt in on. But besides that, it was all covered by the recipient, Russell's insurance company. But I got to thinking, how can we get the word out to people? I just wanted to share. I had a passion to share with people the need and the ease to donate a kidney. And I thought, what if we could get the group back together from 15 years ago that did The Way Home? And I hadn't talked to Dean in a number of years. Dean Cain played me in the first movie. Lori Beth Sykes played my wife. And so I sort of prayed about it, and I actually mentioned that at the Pregnancy Resource Center, how cool it would be if we could do a sequel and pull the whole team back together, but do it through a nonprofit. Set up a nonprofit organization and not only show everyone the need and the ease of kidney donation, but allow the residuals that come in from the theaters or the streaming or whatever, allow that to come right back through. That you have to pay for the movie and all that stuff, but allow all the proceeds to go right back through the nonprofit, and with the goal of recruiting and finding and helping the donors and the recipients, medical facilities, all of these things. And I've learned so many needs out there to literally make a movie to save 100,000 lives. That's the goal. And so the working project sort of became known as End the Wait. ENDTHEWAIT, in the wait for a kidney. Imagine moving the needle in our country that much, where no one that's on dialysis will have to wait anymore. We can eliminate that, and God's laid that vision on my heart. And as I shared that with a few people around the end of the year, first of the year, an attorney here locally in Carrollton and 2 or 3 others I just mentioned it to, one of the ladies at the Pregnancy Resource Center, about 12 weeks ago this week, she sent me an email of a producer that has done a lot of Dean Cain movies. And she said, I thought about what you said, and I think you should pursue it. Here's an email of a producer that I came across that does a lot of movies. So I emailed him right there on my phone right then, standing in my driveway, and he called me 2 hours later. That was on a Monday in April. And then he late April, and then he called me. We talked for an hour. 3 days later, he flew to Atlanta, and we sat down in an IHOP in Ackworth and talked for a couple of hours. And he said, Randy, this is a phenomenal idea. No one's ever done this. There's never been a movie with a purpose of saving lives like this solely. And he said, I'm all in. And he said, I've already reached out to Dean, and he's all in. So a couple of weeks ago, I went up to West Virginia with Lori Beth that played Crystal. I called her, and she's like, absolutely, I'm all in. And we rode, the 3 of us, up to West Virginia. We spent 3 days with Dean, and Dean said, what do we need to do to make this happen? And I said, well, in my mind, there's 336 million people in this country. These movies that are out now, Sound of Freedom, Jesus Revolution, some similar type movies in a couple of thousand theaters across the country, they have that audience. If we can have 100 million people across the country and 1 out of every 1,000 that see the message say, I can do that too, then we will do it. We will wipe out the kidney. We can make it like polio 100 years ago. We can wipe it out. So I think it can happen. And that's what Dean said, and Lori Beth said, this is an achievable goal. This isn't a pie-in-the-sky thing. People just don't know. They need to know the message. And so the screenplay, as we speak, 12 weeks later, the lead actors are on board. The director is on board. He actually, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but when I called and asked him, I hadn't talked to him in a decade or more. And he said, he cried. He said, I've been wondering, my boys are out of high school now, and I've been praying, God, what's my mission in life now? What is it that you want me to do? And then you call and say, hey, let's make a movie to save lives. He said, I'm all on board. And so we talk every day. And JC Films, that's the Jason Campbell, that's the producer that's friends with Dean, that's allowed all this to come together. We've been working with the Community Foundation of West Georgia, and they've been holding our hands as we've started up the nonprofit, but we've started receiving donations. We have interested investors in the movie itself, and it has been incredible. It's like holding on to a tiger's tail with both hands of how quickly this has moved. Yeah. And so, Sara Claudia, I think about what happened 15 years ago when our community came together. Everybody dropped what they were doing, hundreds of people, to save the life of a 2-year-old. So my question is to anyone who hears this, who may be convicted, I can help. I can be a part of that. There's so many opportunities. There's prayer. There's an opportunity to donate. They can go to endthewait.net. There's a donate button on there. They can reach out to me if they may want to give a kidney. We can help make all that happen. But if this one community in Georgia came together just like we did all those years ago, we could literally save 100,000 lives.
Oh, amazing. And everybody heard where to go to help out as we get ready to close. Any last word?
Well, that was pretty much it. I would just encourage anyone that feels this. I'm obviously passionate about it. I'm convicted that that's what God's called me to work on, as well as continue my ministry at church and work. But if anyone feels convicted, they feel God sort of gnawing on their heart a little bit, pay attention to it. And let's not just be in the kingdom, but let's be the kingdom.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Randy, for sharing.
Thank you.